in the past, people planted roses on the graves of their loved ones. Unfortunately for us, they didn't label roses, so unless it's a highly identifiable rose, such as Old Blush or something like that, we are left to guess which rose bush that particular rose is. This video is going to talk about some of the cemeteries that I've gone to in my life um, that had roses in them. So the timing of visiting cemeteries to see roses depends on where you are, and what kind of roses you are interested in seeing. If you're in a warm climate, such as South or Southern California, or California in general, I think. I mean, I understand there are parts of California that get cold, um, but I think for the general rule, California is warmer than several other places. Um, you're probably going to be able to find roses 9 months of the year. Um, warmer or colder areas, you're going to find, I mean, you probably will find roses 9 months of the year as well, but you're going to have the one, and not to say that this isn't going to happen in your warm season areas, but your once blooming roses are going to likely be in colder climates than warmer climates, because they do need that winter dormancy. But your cold climates, you're gonna not as likely gonna have warm season roses such as your teas, chinas, and noisettes. Um, so if you go in the spring, you're gonna catch both the uh, old European garden roses, so your once blooming ones, um, along with a flush of the warm season climates if you're in an area that have them. Um, if you go in uh, the fall, or even during the summer, later, like mid to late summer or fall, you're going to catch the repeat blooming roses, modern garden roses, um, the repeat old garden roses, the warm season, I guess, if you want to call it that. So it really depends on what you're looking. I personally don't have a problem going both times. That way you can see what is the repeat bloomer and what is not. But if you either don't have the opportunity to do that or don't have the desire to do that, then if you're interested in just the repeat roses, then it's worth your time waiting till summer, fall, to see what is blooming and what is not. Starting from the most distance to now, in time wise at least, not necessarily miles wise. Uh, Way back in the 90s, I went to a cemetery um, in the general area of where my parents lived when I was a teenager, um, in Oregon. It had it was in the middle of nowhere. So some of these cemeteries that have roses nowadays are going to be your smaller cemeteries. Um, those that aren't going to be the high profile. I mean, there are some, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Um, but a lot of them are going to be out of your way, so the back road of back roads type thing, kind of remote um, cemeteries. But this one was remote. It had this beautifully white rose that had pink tinged buds on it. Um, there's another cemetery that was closer to my parents, actually on the other end of the road that my parents lived on, um, who had a few cemeteries, or a few roses in the cemetery, and they were nice. They were more modern, so they were probably planted in the early 1900s, I would guess. Moving forward, for my personal timeline of visiting cemeteries with roses, would be the Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, it had quite a few warm season roses, such as teas and chinas. There was a couple uh, old garden roses, like European old garden roses, in there as well. Belgian blue as well. So climbing a rambler, I guess, is what that is. Um, a nice variety of roses There were a few modern roses as well. Um, when I was there, the Oakland Cemetery, the departments of the whoever maintained the park would actually do a plant sale every now and then, and they actually propagated amongst the plants that they propagated were some of the roses that could be found in that cemetery. The next cemetery would be the Fairmont Cemetery in Denver, Colorado. Um, it had quite a few old garden roses, predominantly the European ones, so the once blooming ones, Gallicas damasks. It is colder than Atlanta, so your teas and chinas may not do as well. There were modern garden roses as well, but worth if you're in the area, in the Denver area, definitely worth going and visiting. So the next two cemeteries are actually going to be in Oregon. Um, as an adult, I visited them, so quite a few years after the first couple of cemeteries that I told you about near the beginning of the video. Um, one of them was the Pioneer Cemetery in Salem, Oregon. I mean, the cemetery is maintained, but it's not like one of those ones that you're going to go find that's on the main drag or main highway. I would say that this cemetery is probably closest to the main drag of all the cemeteries that I've talked about or will talk about. Oh, I mean, Oakland Cemetery is pretty. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. It's not that remote, but um, I think the Pioneer Cemetery is probably less remote than the Oakland Cemetery. Anyway, um, there is a, at least one tea rose in that cemetery, but the rest of them were either modern garden roses or European old garden roses. So your Gallicas, Damasks, Bourbons, hybrid perpetuals, which is a cross, which is repeats. So after the Pioneer Cemetery in Salem, um, there is the only other cemetery that I remember the name of in Oregon that I've been to is the Lake Oswego Pioneer Cemetery up in the Portland area. Um, it had mostly either modern garden roses or um, old garden roses, old once blooming garden roses. Um, there was a rose such as the Harrison's Yellow in it. Um, I believe there's a Tuscany Superb or maybe possibly Tuscany in there as well. Um, I believe there was one that looked very similar to like a tea rose in form and growth habit as well. There were a few climbers. There was Russell Cottage Rose. Also, some of the cemeteries in Oregon there was another uh, one in Portland that I don't remember the name that had quite a few. It looked like an organization of some sort had taken a bunch of roses and planted them in one area, so they had like a set aside rose garden in the cemetery. But there were some like mosses and some climbers and things like that. So it was really nice, really pretty to look at. There was um, two or three more cemeteries in Salem that I went to. One was in between my house and my work. So when I walked to work, um, I would walk past it, and it was just a pink rose that was in and of itself. So um, if there had been any other roses planted in the cemetery, they had died, and that was the survivor. Um, there was a couple in a cemetery that the rose bushes were actually tucked either along the fence or toward the back of the cemetery. They were the one toward the back was a um, once blooming rose. The ones along the fence did repeat though, and then there was one way out. It technically had a Salem address, but it was in the middle of the country, and it was just a once blooming old garden rose. Looked very much like Gallica leaves. Um, One of my favorite cemeteries to go to when I was in Oregon was in between Salem and Corvallis. It was in a remote location. I happened to pass it by accident for work one day, and then I went back a few times um, after that. But it had quite a few roses. One of them looked very much like a hermosa, which would be in the repeat blooming uh, old garden rose classification. Um, so like a either China or possibly a bourbon, a repeat blooming bourbon, depending on where you're looking for classification for that rose. Um, and then if it wasn't exactly Hermosa, it was a Hermosa type. Um, there were some modern garden roses and stuff like that. It was set, like it was very remote, but it was set up on a hill, so it was very picturesque as well. Which is some of the nice things about going to some of these cemeteries is they're actually the more remote they are, for me at least, I found the prettier setting that they've been in. Um, and then there was another cemetery not too far away from there that had a few either climbers grown as bushes or freestanding shrubs. Um, I guess would be the probably the better term. Um, I did take my daughter to a couple of these cemeteries, and you'll see her picture in the video. But these were years ago, so these are not accurate pictures anymore of my daughter. Um, and I did go to the Sacramento City Cemetery back in 2017. Um, it was a very beautiful cemetery. It had roses over archways and um, around tombstones, and a lady Banks climbing up the pine tree. I have read that that probably is no longer the case. I do have a video or two about the my visit of the Sacramento City Cemetery, which I will put a link for those videos uh, in the description down below. The last area would be where I'm currently living in the St. Louis, Missouri area. There's a couple cemeteries that do have roses in them. There's a lot of cemeteries in the St. Louis area. So I haven't been to all of them, but the ones I have been, most of them do not have rose bushes in them. The one that has the most of them that I have found is the Fontainebleau Cemetery in, I guess, northeast St. Louis, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, it's got Russell's Cottage roses in there as well. I believe that's what it is, at least. Um, but it going to cemeteries is, at least I find, is fun. Um, if you haven't done it, I recommend it. If you like looking at roses that would tie you back into the 100, 150, 200 years ago type eras. Um, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for your time.